The original plan was to make this dress, but I also was undecided because I've never made this one before. And so I'm not sure which one I'm going to make. Well, it's that time again. You know, I am really glad that I started this because let's see, how many have we gotten done so far? I just did the dress. I did the upcycle pants, the first one, which was the pink dress, and the patchwork top. So I've gotten 4 projects done already that have been sitting in my closet for a very long time. So let's see what's next. Number 5. Number 5. Oh, this is a very pretty fabric. And this one has 2 patterns. The first one is Vogue 1353, this K. Unger dress. And the other one is a dress I've made before, a Butterick 5317. And the fabric is a really pretty cotton blue print. So, Butterick 5317 is a nice dress. I've made it twice. It has pockets and pleats on the skirt. This one I made a few years ago. And this one I made for when I was doing fittings at the bridal store. I like this pattern and I know it will turn out nicely if I remake it, but that would be boring. And we don't do boring here on my channel. So I'm going to make the Vogue K. Unger dress with all of its pleats. You know, the funny thing is that I was a bit hesitant thinking that my print was a little busy, but then I happened to notice that the print she's wearing is busy itself. So I don't think the busyness of my blueprint will be a problem. So the first thing I need to do is find some kind of fabric I can use for a mock-up.
Some tips from a seamstress when it comes to using patterns. You first want to press all of your pattern pieces flat with an iron. That way, you're cutting all of your pieces the correct size. You should always make a mock-up of whatever pattern you are making so that you can get the fitting bugs out first before cutting into your real fabric. Always try as best as you can to use the same weight and type of fabric in your mock-up that you are using in your real garment. This is the heavier sheet that I got from the thrift store, and it matches my cotton fabric pretty well. When making a mock-up, you only have to cut out the main pieces of your pattern and not all of the lining or facings that the pattern calls for. And just like your real fabric, you want to place all of your markings on your pieces so you can sew it together correctly. I like using clay chalk and wax-free tracing paper. To put this dress together, it starts with the bodice front and the bust darts. Now you sew a row of stay stitching down the side edges of the bodice front. To make the pleats on the front of the outside, you crease along one line and fold it over to the other line. Pin them together and then stitch them in place. To sew the side front to the center front, you need to first clip the edge next to your stay stitching to accommodate for the bust curve. Now match your markings and sew the 2 pieces together. This is why you need to be sure to add all the markings in the correct places so your pieces will line up. Next, sew the darts in the bodice back piece and sew the side seams together. Since I'm not adding a facing to the mock-up, I can go ahead and sew my shoulder seams together. Now it's on to the skirt. You start by sewing the 2 back pieces to the front at the sides. To make the pleats, you line up the 2 lines together and sew through them on the inside of the skirt at the waistline. Then it has you sew all the pleats down in one direction. Once your center back seam is sewn together below the zipper opening, you can sew on the bodice matching the side seams and markings. Since I want a good fit, I'm adding an invisible zipper to the back, and we'll be using this purple one in the actual dress because I think it matches well with my fabric. And I think this fits pretty well. Not too tight across my tummy, but I do think it needs taken up at the shoulders just a bit, as well as through the upper sides. I like how the skirt fits, but it definitely needs some pockets. Now this is much better, and I feel a lot more snug now that I've taken it in, and the shoulders feel more secure than before. When it comes to sewing with brand new fabric, do you pre-wash it? Some sewists won't cut anything unless their fabric is pre-washed first. I have not done that with this fabric because I will always wash this dress in cold water and hang it up to dry. It's never going in the dryer, so I'm not worried about shrinkage, and I really don't think the colors are going to bleed. As I mentioned before, you need to lay out all of your pieces to be sure you have enough fabric before cutting. Now I did demonstrate this in my last video, but let me give you a closer look. When you have directional arrows running down the center of your pattern pieces, it means that it needs to line up with the grain of your fabric so that it will be cut on the straight and your garment will hang properly. One other tip when sewing with patterns is that you need to have your pattern pieces all in the same direction with the right side up. I am aware that the center front is flipped over, but any piece that you're cutting on the fold is okay to have it flipped because you're cutting a mirror image of it, and as long as it's in the same direction as the other pieces, you'll be fine. This will ensure a consistency in your fabric's colors, textures, and sheens, and be sure they are all in the correct direction. I have decided to add an inch to the length of the skirt, and I have just enough fabric to do that. I just need to remember to add the extra inch to the lining when I cut it. For the lining, I'm using some black polyester which I had in my stash. I usually have some on hand, and I am not going out to buy a matching blue lining because I want to get this dress done this weekend, and both of my local fabric stores are closed on Sunday, so this will have to do. And this is where I remembered that I had to add that extra inch to the length, and thankfully I was able to move this piece up enough to add that extra inch to it, and then go back and recut the other piece I had just cut. And lastly, the pockets. This is a random pocket pattern that I keep on hand when I want to add pockets to something, and I believe there is just enough fabric left for me to do so, or so I thought. After cutting the first set out, I found I was going to have to cut one side of the other pocket from a different direction, which doesn't really matter because the inside of the pocket is not going to show. But then I soon realized that I cut both pieces for the second pocket in the same direction. Okay, we get one pocket.
Okay, so I wanted to take a moment to just say, give yourself a little bit of allowance to make mistakes. Now, we're not trying to make too many mistakes when we're working with only a certain amount of fabric, but mistakes are going to happen. And I made 3. The second one was when I cut these. I cut these out of regular fabric when they're supposed to be sew-in interfacing. With that being said, I probably would have had plenty of extra fabric to cut another pocket. Now, on this front piece, the first thing it has you do is create the pleats. To do that properly, your markings need to be on the outside of your fabric, on the facing side. Well, I didn't want to use my wax pencils or chalk or anything on there, so I did things like this. I clipped the top of the seam allowance where the pleats are, and I used a tailor's tack at the bottom to know where the bottom of the pleat ends. And so as I fold them and press them, I can then easily remove this stitching as I go. So let's put a dress together, shall we?
I've gone ahead and sewn the pleats on the center front and back, and I can now attach the interfacing. I do not hand baste this on. Normally I'm using a fusible interfacing, but this calls for the sew-in type because you don't want to fuse your pleats in place. To sew on the pocket, pin one piece to the side seam of the front and back and stitch it down. I then understitch the front side of the pocket. Then pin the side seams together and sew down from the top about 3 inches. Now you sew all the way around the pocket and down the rest of the side seam of the skirt. Sew the top of the pocket to the waist and clip the back seam allowance so you can press your side seam open flat. Lastly, I top stitch the front pocket opening. The lining of the bodice and skirt is sewn together basically the same as the outer dress. The only difference is there are no pleats at the top on the neckline, there are 2 underbust darts on the front, and yes, I did not change my thread to black when sewing the lining. Once these 2 are sewn together, I can sew it to the bodice all around the upper back, armholes, and front neckline. Now I have a bone to pick with this Vogue pattern as it tells you to trim the seam allowance, and that's it. Anyone who sews knows the golden rule: clip your curves. How in the world do they expect this to lay flat with no clipping of the curves? Now onto the fun of trying to understitch this as far as I can up the shoulders. And I think I did a pretty good job. To sew the shoulders together, they have you press under the lining and then sew the shoulder fabric together. You press it open flat, and then you whip stitch the lining seam together. They also want you to hand sew the lining to the zipper, but this is where a zipper foot comes in handy to sew it together nice and neat. You just flip the dress inside out, pin the lining to the zipper, and sew it together. Then I only have to hand tack the lining at the top. Finally, we've reached the hem. On the lining, I'm sewing a double-turned 1/4 inch hem. I'm not going to press it first, as I'm just going to fold it under and sew it down. This comes second nature to me from all my years of altering wedding gowns and bridesmaids' dresses. Usually, I will do a rolled hem on my serger machine. There is no wrong or right way to hem a lining of a garment. It's not going to show, so do whatever you like. The hem on the outer dress gets a wide facing. Once you sew the 3 pieces together, you press under your seam allowance first. Pin it to the bottom edge of the skirt, matching your side and center back seams. Then sew it to the dress and understitch it. Now, I originally thought that this facing turned under to the inside of the dress and connected with the lining to make it all enclosed. But instead, once you press it to the inside, you pin the band to the skirt. And then using 2 strands of cross-stitch thread, you sew it down, like a borrow stitch. And yes, you can see on the pattern that's exactly what they did. I love to cross-stitch in my spare time and have a very pretty blue that will match well for my hand stitching. The borrow stitch is basically a hand tacking where you go up and down through all the layers of fabric in little running stitches. It will show on the outside, but my print is very busy and won't show very much. It also didn't take me very long to go all the way around the skirt, which means my dress is finished, and it's time for a photo shoot.
So another project completed, and I'm pretty happy with the way this dress turned out. There are a couple of changes that I have made to it since completing it. One is that when I would wear it, this front neckline would kind of curl down and the lining would show. So I have tacked the lining to the dress in a couple of places. One is at the side seam here, as well as across the waistline. Now the second thing I did was I actually took the bodice in. Now I know I made a mock-up to get all those fitting bugs out. But when the dress was done, it was very full through the bodice. So what I did was I took it in through the back darts and I extended it all the way up to the top, and now it looks like there's a seam through the back. I also added some boning to give it some structure because the shoulder straps of this dress sit very wide on the crown of my shoulder, and so the back tended to ripple and collapse just a little bit, and I did not want to take it up at the shoulders anymore because then that would lift the waistline too much, and so I added some boning for structure. The last thing I did was to add some bust cups. Because the shoulders sit so wide on this dress, on the crown of my shoulder, my bra strap is going to show. And yes, I know you can sew a snap to the inside with the crocheted thread loop that will wrap around your bra strap to keep it angled out on your shoulder. But that's a little uncomfortable for me. And so the easiest thing is to sew in some bust cups. So I hope this video inspires you to try your hand at sewing with patterns if you have not done that yet. I know a lot of sewists out there are doing wonderful things with upcycling garments that they find at the thrift store. I think that's fantastic. For me, I really enjoy working with patterns, and every time I make one, it reminds me of my mom, and I'm so grateful for her because she taught me how to cut and sew a pattern. And it also brings back a lot of memories of all the clothes that she made for herself. You also have to remember to give yourself some grace and know that mistakes will happen. After all my years of sewing, I'm still making mistakes, and I'm still making adjustments on garments that I made a mock-up of. But that's just par for the course when it comes to making things from scratch. I also hope that you're enjoying this Out of the Jar series as much as I am creating them. And there are 18 projects left, so I thought that I would end this video with what's next. Number 6. Number 6. This is very interesting. And I believe this would be a Pinterest-inspired remake, which it is. Inside this bag are a bunch of different garments that I'm going to put together to make this underdress here, to have all these different layers of ruffled skirts on the bottom. I tend to wear a lot of long sweaters and tops, kind of like what she's wearing here in this picture, and I want to have some sort of a underdress to wear with it, but that will be for next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and stay tuned as the sewing madness continues.